This is happiness, to be everything at once. Be unblinded, be unlearned, be unbridled and unburned.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to a brand new episode of Mood Prep. My name is Dave Nixon, and today we're going to talk about the fact that you can't carve dead wood. Now, this is a quote I remember hearing a number of years ago. I think it's one of the quotes that I heard, and at the time it just sounded like a good thing, so I just ran with it. It meant something to me then, and I think as I've understood it more and more as I've gotten older, I've started to understand I suppose my deeper meaning behind the quote as well, and sort of, I think a lot of these quotes, at least for me, and from what I observe in some other people, we get them and we use them as almost a form of protecting ourselves. So it's like, oh, you can't carve dead wood. It's almost not really accepting your own responsibility in the situation. It's like it's not deep enough. It doesn't mean that there's probably not a fair point, or it's not a good understanding of a particular situation, or it's not relevant. It doesn't mean any of that stuff. It is all of that. But what it also does is it stops, if we're not careful, it stops the excavation of looking deeper into the actual issue. So let's talk about not carving dead wood. In short, the meaning means that if somebody is like stuck in their ways, you can't do much about it. Like, they're dead wood, that's just is what it is. They're not worried about growth, and they're just happy to float and go with it all, right? And if you grab it and you try and carve it, it just kind of falls to pieces. It's not good wood is an easy way to think about it. So that's where the actual quote comes from, so to speak. However, I think growing up and looking at it even further and more critically, I've learnt to look at that and go, okay, well, maybe that's correct for that person, or maybe I'm not putting myself in the right shoes. Maybe, I need to use a different carving tool, and maybe the person isn't wood. Maybe they're a completely different thing altogether, and I'm just looking through my lens. That's one. It's going, okay, well, let's look at the second person's perspective in the situation. Maybe they don't respect me. How do I feel about that? Well, there's not much I can do about that, really. I can only influence that, but there's going to be people, like I've said before, is that, like, you may always be someone's fuckwit. Like, there's something that you may not be able to do much about that, and that just is what it is, so it's being okay with that. But the biggest thing that I recognize with all of this is that there's the first and the second person perspective, but what happens is that it doesn't actually go into motives, right? So it could be the motive. If it does touch on motives, it would touch on the motive of this, of like, well, why does that person not respect you, or not, like you, or whatever it may be. You can go into that, you can definitely look at that, but here's the other angle. One that we may not look at because it's got this paved road of, like, goodness, and that is this idea of, why were you trying to carve them in the first place? Were you carving them for your benefit, or were you carving them for their benefit? It's a really important question, because we have to look at, when we're trying to help people, are we helping them for them, or are we helping them for us? And a lot of the time we have to be careful, because there are times when we're helping people for us, to help our identity, right? It's like, I'm going to carve this bit of wood, say you can't carve that. It's like, maybe it shouldn't be carved in the first place. Maybe it should be cared for. Maybe it should be loved. Maybe it should dry out first. Maybe there's a whole range of other possibilities within the analogy. Maybe your axe is just not what's meant to be carving that thing. Maybe you're trying to make that bit of wood into saying that it doesn't want to be. So maybe the analogy actually works in reverse, is that you're the dead wood, right? That thinks that everyone should be holding on to your perspective. And having this perspective on the situation, which I've done before, I'm like, right, okay. And I looked at situations where I used something like this quote to understand it, and I'm like, I was pushing my own values on this individual on some level. I think there's a certain level of they were also disruptive, and they, no matter what I said, they were always happy to reject it, etc., etc. And there's probably deeper reasons behind that, but that's not my job to go into that. That's their job if they want to, and if they don't want to, then so be it. But what I can do, what's in my power, is to go in and have a look at my motives. And this is why I talk so much about motives and context. The way that the motive behind a behavior is so crucial. It's so crucial. And we can sometimes go, well, at face value, that behavior is a really good behavior. So, the society will see it as a good behavior, etc., etc., etc. But only we truly know the motive behind our own behavior. And it really is both confronting and crucial that we actually spend time looking into why are we trying to help somebody? Why are we trying to carve someone? What are we avoiding? Is there something that we're avoiding is probably the first question. And most of the time I would probably round up to a yes, right? Maybe something subtle, maybe we've got a conditional love, the fact that we're only good if we're helping people. So we're going to go try and source out people rather, to try and help, to try and carve, right? It's like, oh, I want to be a mentor to young guys. It's like, yeah, you want to be the person that you wish you had when you were younger. But be careful going and looking for those people, because, it's the whole idea of when the student's ready, the teacher will appear. And this is another one of those things I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. I'm ready. Where the fuck's a teacher? And the teacher was like, well, teacher's reality, bitch. You're not learning. And and so, but what I later learned was that when we become curious, when we become like intrinsic curious about our own behaviors, motives, thoughts, and reasons why we do what we do and think what we think, and etc., then that's where we become the student again, because we're seeking assistance in understanding ourselves, understanding the behaviors and the thoughts and the deeper unconscious, effective motives that are still running, the things that were taught to us that we can't even remember, without really doing some deep work, that are literally running the conversations that we have today. And I'll never forget driving back from Sydney from a seminar, and I had my friend in the car, and they go, what's the biggest thing you've learnt this year? And I'm like, well, to be honest, like the biggest thing I've learnt was I didn't realize how fucked up my youth was. And I'm not saying it was worse than other people's necessarily. I don't want to go into that, because it's not about a game of, who got victimized the most in that circumstance. So that's not what I'm willing to play. What I'm willing to point out with this was I didn't realize how much the protective mechanisms that I learnt to deploy as a child still basically, like, they are littered through my everyday conversations. And I was like, I didn't realize that. And that opened up not just a new door, it opened up a whole fucking mansion of rooms for me to go do some work in. And then I realized how often that I was trying to help people for my own identity. I realized when I was just trying to love people so that they would love me back. And I looked at all these conditions I was putting on all these things, and I just had to sit there over time and just shell away one at a time and look at it and go, I don't have to live like this. I don't have to go out there and try and carve wood every single day. I just have to carve myself. I have to focus on myself, and I have to shed away the dead parts of me. The parts that no longer need to be here. I'm no longer a 10-year-old boy under threat. I'm no longer getting picked on in the schoolyard. I don't have to have that chip on the shoulder. I don't have to be that, do that, act like that. I can be who I am today in the world and trust that that'll be okay. And as wanky as that sounds, it fucking liberated me from the bullshit that I was telling myself for years. So, if you can't carve dead wood, just make sure you're not the dead wood. So team, I'm out. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you found this podcast beneficial, it would mean the world to me if you'd pass it on to someone else that you think would also find it beneficial. If you haven't already, then jump on Facebook and search Mood Prep Online. I'd love to see you in their Facebook group, and we can continue the conversation. Otherwise, if you're a PT or a coach, check out the Coaches Circle. I'd love to have a chat with you and see if it's the right thing for you. Team, that's it. I'm out. Until tomorrow, peace and pizza. Kick today in the dick. Slay the dragon. I'll see you soon.
To be everything at once, be unblinded, be unlearned, be unbridled and unburned.